Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great, and it's a great day to continue talking all things NFL draft prospects. I hope you guys have enjoyed my thoughts, Dwayne's, Chris's, but you know what? Sometimes we got to get some fresh blood in here and find out what the experts truly think. And no one else I would rather talk about some of these incoming prospects with than NBC Sports Rotoworld's finest. We are talking about the lead college football analyst over at Matthew Berry's other job, and who just so happens to be the 2020 and 2023 College Sports Writer of the Year. That's why, right, everyone, we got the reigning, defending champion, Eric Froton. Eric, you're a great guy, better analyst, and an even somehow superior karaoke singer. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, well, it's great to be here, as always. This is our yearly, talk, Ian, where we get to chop it up about the draft. Previously, I don't know if everybody knew, but, we had a Thursday night date just about every Thursday night when I was living in Cincinnati, to hang out and to watch, college football tape and to talk about prospects. That's literally what we did for fun. When Ian is not doing pro football, I would come over, hang out with him and his lovely fiance, and we would go over college football. That's how legit your host, Ian Hartitz, is.
Start the night off at Mad Tree. Shout out to the finest brewery in Cincinnati. And then, literally watch a college tape till around 1 a.m. So I credit Eric for, again, helping me get back into the weeds with some of these guys. Because just when I would, be done with prospects that I knew to even think of, typing into for the old YouTube highlights, Eric would back me up saying, come on, man, you didn't think to watch Ray Davis's, sophomore game against, Louisville going on there. So, again, endless possibilities. And just thanks for being on the show, man. So, as we get into this, Eric, again, you are savage enough to be doing college fantasy football and even, college into pros. So no one, I believe, is better equipped to, again, try to not only break down these prospects, but do it from a fantasy angle. So with that, just kind of talk about your process for, again, evaluating these guys literally from high school and then how you just, continue to see what's going on all the way into the NFL.
Sure. With high school, and as you know, I'm a college fantasy football analyst, and I've been in the college fantasy football landscape for a couple of decades at this point, hence the CFF OG shirt.
Yeah.
So my process starts pretty much junior year of high school. I mean, I'll be looking at the lower levels, of course, but really junior year it starts where I want to identify who's coming up with the next class. I go to the Elite 11 final every year, which is the best 20 QBs in the country for seniors going into high school. It's at Redondo Beach every year. I go to that. It's a 3-day camp and, get a chance to see all these kids coming in. So I'll do that advanced work on the juniors, then do another round heading into the Elite 11. And then, from there, I have a good baseline of what these guys are going into their senior years. And then I'll keep track of the guys that I see and then obviously do more research with. And then be fully prepped, because while you guys are doing your NFL rookie drafts, I have to do my college rookie drafts and C2C rookie drafts. So all those seniors, juniors, all the seniors that I'm watching now, I get to go and pick. So this process really starts as a junior in high school for all these players for me.
Now, I know you have your, again, personal evaluations of these guys, but are you willing to kind of lean on some of the star ratings by, 24/7 Sports and the other outlets? Because I know one of the biggest things that we found, just straight college to the NFL, is that draft capital does, in fact, matter a lot. And as much as every year the Super Bowl comes around and we have someone point out how there's far more 3 stars and lower, playing than 4 stars and 5 stars, like the sample buckets for these players are also huge. I mean, I know 24/7 only tries to give 32 5-star grades a year because that's how many first-round prospects there are. And then we only end up seeing, around 150 4- and 5-star players, per recruiting class. So for you, again, is that something where you could be willing to almost change your mind because we're getting the higher star ratings, or especially for a position like running back, is it just more, hype than anything?
Sure. Well, I mean, those star ratings are just that. They're a guide, of course.
Okay.
So my eyes are going to be the number one sort of thing, but there's so many players that you have to have some way to collate them.
Yeah.
And be able to at least go through and even watch them, because you got to actually watch the tape. And how do you even get to that point? Well, there has to be some way to, figure out who to evaluate. So certainly if you look at the way that the grades and the draft picks are distributed, it's going to be more 5 stars than 4 stars, and it's more 4 stars than 3 stars. And then the 3 stars, even though obviously they were more raw heading into college, like I don't discount anybody because they were 3-star now over a 4-star at this point of where we're evaluating. So everybody's had college tape to evaluate. Even a lot of 5-stars, most of them don't get drafted anyways, even though they're 5 stars coming into college. It's not like basketball where you're fully formed at 18 years old and it's like, all right, go right to the NBA. That 3 years is important for college. So I tend to give them all a clean slate from the star rating once we get into NFL draft time, but it's important for going through the players and that initial salvo to watch them.
I think that's a good way of putting it. It's a piece of the puzzle like anything else, but we don't need to completely, change our opinions on the player just because of what, an evaluator thought of them 3-4 years ago. So takes me back to last preseason when, the Rams took Zach Evans, I think in round 7, and all of a sudden everyone's just like, yeah, this guy was a former 5-star. So is Cam Akers, who's ahead of him on the depth chart at that point. So just make sure we're not only counting it for certain players.
Great comp with the Zach Evans right there.
Oh, yeah, man.
On the 5-star front. But some of that's with the attitude with him, too.
For sure. So, all right, last thing before we get into some specific players. So in our lovely game of fantasy football, I've always maintained that the 2 kind of archetypes that when you look at the fantasy leaderboards and you look at, more of like a real life rankings leaderboard, the differences you're going to see in fantasy are that rushing quarterbacks end up popping because we don't properly, we don't properly weight sacks negatively for them, and just the rushing yards, having the multiple facets of production. It makes them, cheat codes. And also the receiving running backs. Like, it is just tough in this day and age for a running back without a pass game role to be that much of a fantasy game changer. We can still get, the touchdown spikes, your 2019 Mark Ingram seasons and stuff like that. But we definitely want running backs that at least, if things break their way, they can handle that 3-down role. Similar to someone I was really wrong about in 2022, Ramondre Stevenson, where, okay, maybe he did have some competition for, different areas of his workload, but guess what? Those guys got injured and he himself had the 3-down capabilities to seize that role when it eventually went his way. So when looking specifically at how these running backs can catch, Eric, what's kind of your method for determining that? Do you look at the raw production? Or are you just trying to see if they have, the soft hands and capabilities? Because there are a lot of offenses out there, Michigan, Wisconsin's of the world, who don't really involve their running backs in the passing game. And it's tough sometimes to look at guys with underwhelming pass game production, yet they are a former 4-star, 5-star running back who feasibly could tap into that game more at the next level. Overall thoughts on, again, evaluating more so the pass catching prowess of these guys?
Yeah, sure. I guess with the pass catchers, and we have to be careful about it with Kenneth Walker, right? Because that was
exactly.
Remember during that cycle, it was all, he caught like 6 passes his entire career, or something like that. Because Mel Tucker didn't do that over there at Michigan State. So it's like, how can you ding him? Because the team just doesn't do it. That's the thing about college. Like, some dudes just don't catch passes. They're just not going to see them. So I don't want to ascribe a skill set that doesn't exist for a player just because a team, it isn't in what their scheme is, so you have to be careful about that. But I would say so that is something I don't want to disqualify somebody just because their team doesn't allow them to do it. Now, if he attempts to do it and I see him, trying to catch the ball and he can't, well, that's a different ball game, but it's not a disqualifier. On the other side, when somebody does get a lot of volume, and for college fantasy purposes, I have the rule of 3 is kind of how it goes when I'm scouting college fantasy running backs. I want 30 receptions, as close as you can get to that in college, because obviously it's a different ball game than you're like 30 receptions. But 30 receptions, that's like top 12. Only 12 guys last year had 30 receptions. I want 300 receiving yards. Okay. Again, that's only like 10, 15 guys who got that. I think less than 10. And then 3 receiving touchdowns. Like the 3s are the benchmarks I look for. If you're hitting those, generally you can catch the ball. And I'll go, obviously, and you got to verify all that with your eyes, trust but verify. But generally you find those guys who get those volume can handle it, are pretty good. Where it gets into being difficult is, like you said, trying to evaluate the guys that you don't have a lot of tape on. I think that's where the nuance of the scouting kind of comes in.
looking at some of those guys, checking off the threes. I like when we have handy dandy, qualifiers like that.
Yeah,
Last year, in terms of Power 5 running backs, and we'll get into that later, I do end up being a bit of a, Power 5 elitist, which is a hole in my current strategy.
Gotta happen.
I admit it. But you know what? Yeah, it got to happen at some point. Like you said, there's a lot of players out there. Can't necessarily watch each and every one of these guys, but I only see 3 guys that even cleared the 30 reception mark last year, Eric. And, 2 of them also got the receiving yards. Touchdowns are up and down. But Bucky Irving, 55 catches, 395 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know he's had some concerning speed score stuff. Didn't exactly blow away the combine, but can catch passes. Ray Davis, one of the best stories of the entire draft. I mean, this is a dude who I believe when he was 11 or 12 still forced to, be living in a homeless shelter, was able just to work his way up. And again, brutal childhood, but the guy is absolutely crushing now. Great last season at Kentucky. And then Will Shipley, who, man, just gives you the Danny Woodhead, Patrick Lair, Christian Now I'm just naming white running backs and being a but those are the 3 guys, Eric, that we have, qualifying there. Thoughts on them specifically, if there's one you favor?
Yeah, Will Shipley, I don't particularly like. It's just he can't get it done between the tackles with him. Over there at Clemson, they don't take transfers. So it was Will Shipley coming in last year, and he was a 5-star running back. Coming in last year, he was a consensus top 5 running back amongst the Devy community. Not me, but he was a top 5 running back. I always liked his backup running back, or his 1B at Clemson, Phil Maffa more, and I went and made the rounds in the preseason last year and said as much and said, I think Phil Maffa is better than Will Shipley. I don't like Will Shipley. I didn't have him on any of my college fantasy teams. Phil Maffa's the guy, and he came out and he was objectively better than Shipley this season. So I can't sit there and watch him where he got overtaken by somebody in his own backfield and was clearly better all 3 of those years, in my opinion. And then he leaves as a 3-year guy. Like, Shipley needed another season. Yeah. I'm not in on him. But Bucky has preseason, or it should be before the combine, he was lined at like 4.4 flat on his 40 time. And frankly, I was leaning under. Dude, his play speed is way, way better than what you're seeing on that track. And if there's a comp that I'd use for him, it's Kyron Williams. It's the one that basically slaps you in the face with Bucky Irving, because you watch his play speed. And I'd love to see the real analytics mile per hour gun on him, because some guys are just faster in pads than they are on the track. And I just feel like Bucky's one of them. He's small. He's 195. I mean, there's no getting around that here. But so is Jahmyr Gibbs. I know he's got the freaky everything, in terms of his testing. But when you look at Kyron Williams, he ran a 4.65. People forget. He ran a 4.65. Everything about him, if you watch Kyron Williams' tape, it was money. He's great in blitz pickup. He's great out at, he did everything right. Out of the backfield, he's catching passes. He's doing it all. And I have that same feeling about Bucky Irving. He's elusive. He catches the pass. 52 of 58 receptions last year. He like the extended handoffs too. And he's getting it in space, and he is just dicing people up. So hard to get a beat on him. His elusiveness, his lateral agility. He's so much, and he's not getting any buzz because of the fact he ran a 4.55 or whatever it was. These are running backs,
And Eric, speaking about the real mile per hour speed, I pulled it up right now, and shout out to Real Analytics. It's very cool stuff. Just so you guys know, they are judging it based on the actual tape. So that's why we see the next gen times where it's in their actual shoulder pads. They are a little bit slower. So I'm not trying to say that, he's, faster than X running back. They are different speeds, but using just the Real Analytics speed, Jalen Wright clocked a 22.2 mile per hour run at the Senior Bowl. Blake Corum back in 2022 got to 22.1 miles per hour. Third place among running backs is Trey Benson at 22 miles per hour. And in fourth place at 21.8, Bucky Irving, man. And I'd say that matters a little bit more than what you're running in, shorts and a T-shirt there in Indianapolis.
Dude, I completely agree. It's an unnatural thing to be like, all right, you have to go now in the offseason and train to do this specific drill, the 40-yard dash. That has nothing to do with the actual what you're doing out there in the field, especially as a running back, So I'm not as bothered by his testing because of, again, what I got to see on the field out of him and how tough he is to square up for tacklers. He's probably, that aspect of him in terms of the shiftiness, he's a threat to cut even when he's full speed at any second. And I think he's as good as anybody in the class at that particular element. And if he was 205 pounds, you'd be talking about him differently. I sincerely feel that way.
Yeah, and look, not every single undersized, low athletic profile running back can turn into Kyren Williams. But for me, it's just that receiving production. And then obviously, again, the quantifiable game speed being on a different level. Good stuff from Bucky there. So any thoughts on Ray Davis? Obviously, someone who spent quite a bit of time in college. I mean, the dude is already, 24 and a half years old. So hardly a spring chicken out here. But that said, does seem to, have a bit of burst. And again, with that pass catching skill, at a minimum, man, it seems like he could be someone to, steal away a third down role. And even if he's not someone that's necessarily going to be this bell cow in the NFL, could be a guy that, again, if we do see go round 4, round 5, maybe has a better chance of working his way into a committee role than someone without his, level of skill set.
Sure. And with Ray too, Raymond Davis, started out at Temple. I mean, this kid grinded his way. And it's like you had sort of alluded to his personal story. It's no shocker. Why this kid is just resilient. Starts out at Temple, year one, just short of 200 carries, but certainly separates himself. Goes on to Vanderbilt. At Vanderbilt, keep in mind, you were mentioning guys who catch passes. He didn't do much of that at Temple or Vanderbilt, right? So he is almost a good example of, I don't want to tell you that he can't, because I haven't seen him do it. Because his first 5 years, first 4 years, this is year 5 at Kentucky. He didn't catch passes. And at Vandy, to put it in perspective, he got 29 of 37 targets, which is okay, right? 169 yards, 0.77 yards per route. Whereas last year at Kentucky, 32 of 39, 324 yards. It's 1.3 yards per route. He almost doubled his yards per route average, there at Kentucky. So they used him in a way that he simply wasn't deployed before, and you saw him and he could do it, So while I certainly look at him as, okay, just like a solid number 2 running back, that you have somebody who's a little more dynamic physically, who has a little more home run ability as that RB1, but that secondary guy, I feel like Ray Davis has that sort of a profile all day for me. That dependable, what you're getting out of him in that second, back role. If the guy ahead of him gets injured, he can absolutely step in and be able to carry your team for a few weeks. That's what I kind of see the perfect scenario for Davis, but he doesn't have quite the explosiveness that I look at of like a Bucky Irving. But he's bigger too. So I like Ray Davis. Probably closer to like the RB10 than the RB6-7 range for where I think Bucky is in.
So you have Bucky, RB6, RB7. Let's go ahead and, fill out that top 5 if you don't mind. I know we were breaking down, before the show, but your number 1 is not a certain Texas running back that everyone seems to be lining up there. We're looking at, Florida State's finest, Trey Benson. Talk about the love and affinity there.
Absolutely. And there is love and affinity, Ian. That is a perfect way to describe it. Last year, Trey Benson was heading into the season my favorite sleeper running back, I would say, for NFL draft purposes. He's still at Florida State. He's sharing carries with Lawrence Toafili. They had a 3-back system that Mike Norvell sort of ran back there. So we didn't get the huge volume, especially early in the season, as they tried to save him a little bit in the non-conference. But then once Jordan Travis, their quarterback, went down, they had to lean on Trey Benson a lot more because they had a pair of quarterbacks come in. The number 2 got hurt, so they're down to a number 3 QB who could barely throw a forward pass. Yeah. So it drastically affected everything they were doing. But with Benson, you look at his measurables, and he's 220. He's around that. He's 6 foot, 6'1". He ran a 4.39.
Whew.
I mean, we're talking, this is Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker proportions that we're dealing with. You don't see a lot of sub 4.4s at 220, no. For the running back group. And while certainly I think the common refrain is his vision, does he have the vision? Is he as well-oiled a machine and seasoned as he needs to be? That there's legitimate criticism to there. I mean, I've seen him run into his blockers' backs a few times, but when he hits that hole, and he does have a good solid, agility profile as well. When he hits that hole, man, he's got the acceleration, he's got the lateral agility, and he's big enough to be able to handle the load. I got to go with the one after Jonathan Brooks coming off an ACL. I know that ACLs are like Tommy John surgery for pitchers now, but he's still coming off an ACL, Jonathan Brooks. So, while I do like him, certainly, I have the top 5 as being, pretty interchangeable.
It is wild to me. Shout out, and I say it every podcast now, but guess what? We're talking recruits. So Dane Brugler's the beast. Incredible. If you guys haven't read it,
incredible, the beast.
Definitely need to. And you mentioned it, Jonathan Brooks coming off the ACL. I was surprised where it's just like these poor running backs, man. Like you go through almost every single running back profile, and at some point, these guys have seemingly all had some horrible knee injury, like in their past. Like even Trey Benson back in December of 2020 tore his ACL, MCL, and lateral and medial meniscus in his right knee. So I think that actually spurned his original decision to go ahead and transfer from Oregon to Florida State. Obviously ended up being a good move for him there. So again, Trey Benson, RB1, managed to catch 33 balls over his final 2 seasons at Florida State. Blue blood program, obviously do not worry about the competition he was facing. Good stuff there. So yeah, maybe I don't think he's gonna get the draft capital of someone like Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall, but hey, big running backs who can handle 3-down rolls with breakaway speed. I've heard worse combinations in the world out here. So
I've got a type.
Not a bad type. Not a bad type. So who we go on RB2? Are we just going to go all in on the size speed freak and go Isaac Gwendo, whoever the hell his name is? I know you're not, but you could imagine.
No, I do think that Jonathan Brooks, he deserves to be in the elite kind of 4 that I have, 5. He deserves to be in that group. I am going with him as, the RB2 if I had to go with it. Again, I mean, he's sitting behind Rashawn Johnson and Bijan Robinson.
Yeah. For
the first couple of years of his career. Like, what are you going to do? He was a total you didn't know what you were getting out of him going into last season. So there wasn't any NFL draft buzz surrounding Jonathan Brooks heading into 2023 because you also had CJ Baxter, the RB1 of the freshman class, according to 247 coming in. And everyone thought Baxter was just going to come in and say, all right, well, that's it. It's going to be his gig. Jonathan Brooks, it was his gig sort of in the spring. Didn't know if that was just a nominal veteran thing. And then he comes out and he had a legitimately great season up until when he tore his ACL, and 90th percentile run grade, 3.9 yak, anywhere near that 4 yards after contact. That's what I'm looking for running backs, as close as you can get or over it. Explosiveness, 24 rushes of 10 plus yards. He can even pass block. You see him out there in the backfield and pick up, and he can do that. It's just he has a really nice, rounded profile, smooth running style, fluid hips. Like he doesn't have that high end speed, but he's very fluid in his movements. Good following his blockers, good vision. He has a solid all around profile for Brooks. Wish he was a little bigger at 207, but that didn't matter for last year's class. We had A-Chain. You had Gibbs, as we talked about as well. You had Tyjae Spears, who was 205. So you had a smaller class last year, and it hasn't affected any of those guys. So look, Brooks at 210. All right, 205, 210. I'm not worried about it.
And honestly, one of the things I meant to ask you while we were kind of going through the overall prospect evaluation, the fact he only has 266 collegiate touches, to his credit, I think that's a positive. I don't need every running back to have multiple years of, 250 plus touches like Blake Corum. I mean, if you got the size, if you had 1 year of showing you can work across all 3 downs, hell, Eric, I'd almost argue it's a positive to not have as much wear and tear on you. Not every guy, needs to be freaking going through Derrick Henry's high school coach out here and just already be so beaten down by the time they make it to the pros.
I couldn't have said it any better. Right on the money. And when I look at, for a comp on Brooks, I see Ricky Waters. I'm going old school here. I see Ricky Waters. He's got that upright, the high knee. That's what I see.
Dude, Ricky Waters, he had the 97-yard OT winner, I think. Am I thinking the right 49ers running back?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 49ers all day. A great 49ers running back. He was in Seattle for a while, too.
think I got that right. I could be thinking of Charlie Garner. If so, I sincerely apologize. But I love the throwbacks. It is legal in the year 2024 to comp someone to a pre-2000s running back. Great stuff there. So, all right. So we've gotten through, again, some of the bigger names out here, but I know there is a certain running back out of Tennessee who, a bit of a polarizing prospects. On the one hand, you look at Jalen Wright's, underlying numbers, and they are borderline erotic. Like this dude, again, just ripping off one big run after another. But you also, start watching a little bit of that tape, and I know it's because of the Tennessee offense, but my God, some of these boxes, Eric, like not even 5-man boxes. Like I've seen clips and just even screenshots of their legit being 3 defensive linemen and 1 poor soul linebacker about to take on, this Tennessee offense. So when you look at this scheme, and hey, Tennessee, Kamara over the years, even Jalen Hurd, if he hadn't gotten hurt, oh my goodness, one of the bigger what ifs, at least in my mind, over the last few years. So how do you kind of separate what Wright can bring to the table himself? Obviously, he landed at Tennessee for being a really talented running back, with the reality that, man, might not have been a more, fantasy-friendly, running back-friendly offense out there in college football.
Sure. Well, that was the Josh Heupel offense of 2022. That was one of the most fantasy-friendly, potent offenses in the world. The 2023 version under Bazooka Joe Milton, not so much. Not so much. Somehow, Joe Milton, who had to be subjected to all these Twitter videos about, look how far he threw the ball. He threw it 62 miles an hour. Yeah, that's wonderful. I watched Joe Milton for 5 years. I can't unsee what I saw with Joe Milton. He turned the Tennessee offense into a power run game, right? I know you probably got some of those boxes early in the season. Let me tell you, in the second half, as soon as the SEC figured out that, dude, let Joe Milton throw the ball, things changed. Schemes changed in the second half of that season because Joe Milton sucked. That being said, we're talking about Jalen Wright. And Jalen Wright, sure, you look at the way that he ran, the schemes, was there a lot of diversity in the way that he was used? Not really. He was used in the same basic, kind of formats. He wasn't doing a lot of outside runs to take advantage of his speed, which they probably should have. But, he was doing a lot of up the middle between the tackles work. And that's what they're trying to do, spread them out and hit them up the middle. If you can do that, as, you kind of talk about with those alignments. But he turned that team into a running team, Joe Milton. So they had to deal with a little bit more boxes than you'd think. And you can't fake yak, all right? 4.35 yards after contact. That's elite, top 5 in the nation last year. You can't fake that. When men are making contact with you in the SEC, trying to bring you down, and then you are able to power through that contact, that just is what it is, So you can't fake it. 132 elusiveness rating. Again, that's the same type of thing. But when he hits that hole, 35 rushes at 10 plus, 19 of 15 plus. He hits that hole, he is gone. 4.39, 40. You see it. He's not small. He's over that 210 threshold that you want to see him at. 22 of 25 targets. He caught 74.5 receiving grade. He pass blocks pretty well. Things that I like to see from my running backs. That even if the stats don't show it, as we talked about the rule of 3, yeah, he cut 22 or 25, didn't get as many targets, but he lined up in the slot 10% of the time. That's a pretty high slot rate, out there, which means he's getting reps where he's doing real routes that he's having to run. You got to trust a guy to put him out there. If they didn't trust him, they just put someone else. Like I said, they did a 3-back rotation there too, so that sort of stuff. 1.3 yards per route, right there with Brooks. That's kind of what you want to see. I want at least 1.2 or more. All those thresholds are being hit. Where he's getting, like you said, the refrain is it the system? Is it the scheme that we're dealing with? Is he a product of that? I think he's better than what he's being given credit for in that respect. He tested like a freak. I was on him coming into this year, so I do have an element of bias to it, but yeah, I'm here for Jalen Wright. I'm in. I think he's a worthy RB3.
And it was good to see that jump in receiving production. I mean, only 2 catches for 8 yards in 2022. But again, you look at these offenses, and especially the things that, Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt were doing in that 22 season. Like, they were throwing it to the outside and usually deep downfield every play. And it was working. So why were they going to involve the running backs more often? So
Jalen Hyatt's 2022 film is just him running from the slot flies naked. That's what he was doing the whole time. It was,
outrunning everyone. Nice stat from Dane Brugler. 25.7% of his carries in 23 went for 10-plus yards, number 1 in the FBS. So, really explosive running back. I know, had some light boxes, but as Eric explained, weren't exactly light for his entire tenure there. Don't let, 3 or 4 screenshots completely cloud your opinion of a guy.
He only had 136 carries. He ran for 1,000 yards on 136. Like,
not too shabby.
He didn't even get the volume. Still got tread on the tires, too. Like, there's a lot to like there.
Couple more RBs. We can maybe talk a little wide receiver here in a bit, but what do you make about Audric Estime's 40 time and overall profile? He is someone that wasn't exactly catching passes, and again, not completely ruling it out, but I did, before the show, go ahead and look at just last 2 seasons, PPR points per game from purely receiving production. And we got, again, Bucky Irving, Ray Davis, Will Shipley. Those are the only guys over 5. At the bottom, the only, 3 of kind of the big 12 to 15 running backs out there, at least in the Power 5. Audric Estime at 2.4, Blake Corum at 2.2, and Jalen Wright at 1.6. So talked about Jalen Wright and that kind of being a factor of that offense. Audric Estime with Notre Dame, I don't know, man. I thought there could have been more opportunity for him to be a pass catcher, but he just wasn't really used that way. So do you, again, look at Estime, who has some pretty nice hurdles out there. Shout out Sam McGuffey, him going out there and doing
Sam McGuffey!
Yeah, there we go. 227 pounders. So, a little bit bigger out there than old Sam. And we're going to be getting some McGuffey storylines going heavy here at the Olympics. So, just let me be the first to, get that memory back in your guys' heads. But Audric Estime, early down grinder, or can he be more than that at the next level, Eric?
I like Audric Estime a lot. If you watch his film, and you're just going off film and you don't look at the track, because his 40 time was, it was terrible.
Yeah.
But so was Kyron Williams. Again, there's another Notre Dame running back who didn't have this great 40 time, but you watch his tape and you're like, this guy is for real.
That NC State 80-yard house call, woo, he was moving on that one.
Hell yeah, he was moving on that. You look at him, and you mentioned the hurdling. Yeah, his Clemson game. Watch Notre Dame Clemson against a man-sized defensive front, and he is housing people. He is blasting through people, with tackles. And we're talking about, serious dudes, Trotter, Ruka Row, big dudes hurdling people. And it's like, how can you not have, like, you watch the athleticism he shows on tape and it's there at 225, 230, it's there and you can't deny it. It's, he's another guy that it didn't translate to the track, but you watch him and I believe in Audric Estime. Him and Irving are in that 6-7. It's the top 5 and then Estime and Irving. Like I can't, and you mentioned the catching the ball.
Yeah.
He only got 17 targets. He caught all of them. What do you want? He caught all of his targets. You can only throw him more passes. Maybe we'll get to see him catch more balls. And he even caught all 3 of his contested targets.
Okay.
So all that profile, I'm not worried about it, at all. 94th percentile run grade, 4.3 yards after contact, 10th in the entire FBS, and he's playing, against Notre Dame, against serious upper level competition. He was pretty much the only thing they could do against Ohio State, and Ohio State had one of the top 3 defenses in the country. Watch Sam Hartman try to throw the ball sometime.
God.
Like, dude, watch his hair, obviously. But then observe the arm, and they had to rely on Estime, to an outsized degree for what they wanted to. And they won't have to do it as much this year because they got Riley Leonard at quarterback. But I really like Estime. I love that he's being discounted now because of his track stuff. And I think, you're getting him in these rookie drafts in the 3rd round. That's a smoking deal if you want to go, QB wide receiver, and then 3rd round you sit tight and Estime's there. Or because he's got the 225 profile. If you want that instead of the 195 of Bucky, He's got the chance to be at least a 2-down pounder. I think that's a phenomenal investment.
And Estime is for sure going to be that guy, whether it's in May or June. Like, we're going to get the team account posting a picture of him shirtless, working out, where he just looks like an absolute Greek god out there, relative to his teammates. And accordingly, we'll get the random AJ Dillon, sort of bump up the ranks. That, warranted or not, people will see, again, just an absolute yoked up beast of a man and think,
with agility.
Football. With agility
at that size, like, man, he's going to do well. I think he's going to be good. I know he's not
got
fast.
Fun highlights, man. I think he had 2 hurdles on 1 run, like no joke. Even if you don't want to go, he's got the Alexander Madison gene in him, who is jumping over everyone at Boise State as well. So good stuff from Estime. I want to say we've talked about 5 of your 7 top running backs. Are we filling it out with Marshawn Lloyd and Blake Corum? Do I have that right?
Oh my man, Marshawn. Yeah, there's a new Marshawn in town. It's not the other Marshawn you're used to, but we're going to have another one, and it's Lloyd, and he is going to be awesome. Oh. Another guy, have him in C2C, 2 of my 3 C2C leagues, his shares. So I am personally invested, but man, you look at him, 41% broken tackle rate. He only got 115 carries, guys, and he was phenomenal. He averaged 7 yards per carry. 177 elusiveness rating. That's 4th in the country. 4 yards after contact. That's 3rd after contact. SIS has him at 4.3, which would be top 10, as we talked about before. And then on the receiving side, right, only got 18 targets, which, he didn't get hardly any at South Carolina before he transferred over to USC last year, right? But what did he do with those targets? 13 catches, 232 yards. Out of 18 targets. That's insane. That's 17.8 yards per reception. That's number 1 in the Power 5. And it's not just number 1. It's number 1 by 2.5 yards. The next closest was 15 with Josh Williams. It's like he crushed. He was flexed out wide, not in the slot. He was flexed out wide 9.5% of the time. These are things that I'm looking at to judge how does the staff feel about his ability to catch passes.
Yeah.
Well, you're not tossing him out there, even though he only got 18 targets. You're not throwing him out wide 10% of the time unless you believe in him. And he gave them reason to believe, because if you watch, a cut up of some of these targets, he had a couple of incredible back shoulder catches on his film that if you're watching that, you're saying, oh my God, this guy's not just a good receiver, he's a great receiver. So on those 13 catches, he dodged 10 tackles. That's an almost 100% dodge tackle rate per catch. So not only does he have the ability to see it, and he uses his hands, he's not body catching, using his hands, gather, sight, and then make a move. What more do you want? I mean, that's what I'm here for. That's what I want to see. So, and he even caught 2 of his 3 deep targets.
I was about to speak on the
targeted downfield too. Like this whole profile screams he's not being looked at as a receiving threat in the same way that he should have, simply because of usage. And you can't fade what he did between the tackles. So, and then obviously he had a really solid combine. I'm in. I'm so in on Marshawn Lloyd. Been in and thrilled to see what kind of incredible season he had in 2023.
I was going to say, with those deep targets, a lot of times when you watch, like, okay, average target depth over 15 with these guys, usually it's kind of like, a swing route, and then the quarterback buys some time and the running back winds up going downfield and they, make a nice scramble drill. USC was actively designing some of these. I mean, my God, it gave me some nightmare flashbacks to playing linebacker, where they do a play action and that running back who you're expecting to try to, stop and B gap is just running straight past you down the seam. And those were the sorts of plays that Lloyd has had a chance to do. And looking at Power 5 running backs, at least 15 targets. I mean, something named Kobe Pace. Shout out to Kobe Pace, I guess. And Marshawn Lloyd.
Kobe Pace, Virginia. Former Clemson running back. He got shoved in a locker by Maffa and Shipley, then went to Virginia. Sorry.
Those are the only 2 running backs with an average target depth north of 3 yards. So I'm not comping Marshawn Lloyd to James Cook necessarily, but that is what we saw from James Cook out of Georgia a little bit. It is so rare to see running backs with an average target depth over even 1 yard. A lot of them are negative because they're just catching screens behind the line of scrimmage. So anytime you start seeing that average target depth, 2.5, 3 yards, like that's actually the sort of, role that we can say, no, not necessarily Eckler or CMC from day one, but hey, that is someone who can get not just checkdowns, but actually be an integral part of the passing game. So I'm with you. Marshawn Lloyd, top 5 RB in my book as well. Where do we fall on Blake Corum? Doesn't have the receiving production, but my goodness, the man can score some touchdowns. All-time leader, obviously, in the storied University of Michigan history. So with Blake Corum, obviously, I think would have been a lot higher on people's boards had he not suffered that injury in 2022 and come out early. But by the end of last season, at least, some of the things he was doing to Ohio State and Bama certainly looked like he was back closer to 100% relative to what we saw earlier in 2023.
Yeah, Corum, this is tough. This is in the preseason. I had those top 4. Those are my guys. And then that 5, 6, 7 with Corum, Estime, and Irving, I was really trying, all right, who is that 5? And it is Corum. And, there are troubling advanced metrics on him. But you can look at it and say, all right, well, he's 1 year off an ACL, 2022, had a nice stretch run down 2023. But look, at the end of the day, you can't get around 2.47 yards after contact. That was 137th out of 152 qualifying running backs with 100-plus carries last year.
Not
that
great.
Is pitiful. There's no way to get around that. I don't know what to say about this. 20 runs of 10-plus yards. That's 70th in the country. Of the 40 1,000-yard rushers last year, Corum's 4.7 yards per carry was 107th in the FBS, overall, but was the third lowest of the 40 running backs to have 1,000 yards. Third lowest. The lowest, and I talked about to you a little bit off camera, Quinshon Judkins, 4.4 yards per carry.
Come on.
The lowest
good
yards
vibes
per carry.
For the Buckeyes. Only good vibes allowed for Ohio State.
Dude, I'm just telling you, he's, he transfers from Ole Miss to Ohio State, and his number, they weren't very good on a particular per carry basis.
Fair.
And he was a malcontent. I'm nervous about Quinshon. Everybody's got him as their number 1. I'm not there. Anyways, off topic. So these particular metrics here we're looking at with Corum just does not give you a lot of confidence, which is why I was like, I don't know. But then, to be fair, you look at what he had done previously, how he looked, looking at his 2022 tape, looking at how he looked at the end of the season, the profile where he is just a workout freak, like just strong, everything about him. He's just an animal, in terms of the way he's put together. His ability in short areas to, in tight spaces, he has this ability to sniff out yardage that is just, it's something you just can't teach. He just has that he's a little hamster, he's small, but he just grinds his way through there and comes out the other side of that hole. Like the tough yards is where he really excels. So I do think that he is worthy of that 5 spot because of those traits. We don't have a lot of pass catching. It's just not what they did in Michigan. 14 of 16 for 82 yards, and he dropped the pass. Like, great. Not much there. I think because of that, he's more in that 5, 6, 7 than the top 4 for me. But he is my number 5.
And hey, if he does happen to land with, a certain former Michigan coach in Los Angeles, I'm sure he will get, the sort of opportunities that he needs to be successful. But again, doesn't exactly seem like someone who is completely landing spot proof. And again, we do also have concerns. I'm not saying he can't catch, but he didn't make a habit of doing it. Tough to immediately assume, especially given his size and arm length, that, he is going to be someone that can work across all 3 downs. So before we get into a little more RB chatter, guys, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. Swish, that's the sound of a parlay hitting. Lord knows it is not the sound that makes, after I shoot a basketball. Horrendous jumper, ladies and mostly gentlemen. But you know what? I'm trying out there. So that's right. We teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook for the NBA playoffs. Go Cavs. Right now, they're giving new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly when they bet just $5 on any wager. Don't miss your shot. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. So I don't know about you, Eric. I don't really give a shit about the NBA during the regular season, but we get the playing games going. We got the playoffs going. I can start throwing it, at least on TV too, while I'm trying to, finish Shogun and, Mr. and Mrs. Smith and some of these other great TV series out here. So again, appreciate all the fine folks at DraftKings. $200 in bonus bets, just a $5 wager. Again, promo code Fantasy Life. Appreciate you guys. So Eric, you mentioned at the top, we've been, getting together and doing this pod, on an annual basis. And you had one of the best future predictions that I can remember anyone having on a podcast with myself when you, first of all, shout out back in, I believe it was 2021, before the draft, you said Elijah Mitchell was, standing out as a day 3 guy who could really end up making some noise in fantasy land. Lo and behold, ends up having a great season for the 49ers in the pre-CMC days. So have you on the podcast and I ask you, hey, who could be this year's Elijah Mitchell? This kind of guy that no one's really worried about, but hey, all of a sudden, gets a nice role and maybe has that 3-down skill set. And it hasn't necessarily worked out in terms of fantasy production, but you literally hit on Tyrion Davis-Price, who I did not see anyone else even mentioning as having a chance of being highly selected. And Lord, he ends up going to the freaking 49ers as a day 2 pick. So do you have another later round prospect who you think could be in that Elijah Mitchell mold? Or do you just want to go ahead and pick, Kyle Shanahan's next day 2 RB?
Right. We do seem to have a type, myself and Kyle. I appreciate that. In terms of down the board, guys, there's a couple I like. You had actually mentioned Isaac Guerendo, which his physical profile, you have to respect it.
Yeah.
He was at Wisconsin, and obviously he was there last year, kind of split time with Jawar Jordan at Louisville. But like the sprinter profile, I wish he was a little more elusive, but that straight line of speed is impressive. But if I had to go, a couple of them that I really like that are down the board, Kamani Vidal, Troy, we're talking the group of 5. He is right there. Led the nation in rushing this year, 295 attempts. So there's a little tread on those tires. But 93rd percentile run grade, 3.6 yards after contact. In terms of, he dodged 94 tackles this year. That's extremely impressive. 47 runs of 10-plus yards. Very, very impressive in that front. And, a 120 elusiveness rating for a guy who at 5'8", 213 has that little bowling ball profile. What's really cool about him is he's stout, and he's low to the ground. He's got that center of gravity and the big legs and the trunk. But he has incredible contact balance that you just don't see from a guy with those proportions, where he absorbs the hit and he'll, either he can deal out a blow or he can absorb them, and when he does, gosh, you see him just the ability to use his hands, use his feet to spin, just to be able to stay on his feet and keep going is, legitimately special. He also caught passes, 91. He got 122 targets, caught 91 of them. So he was used in the pass game. I do feel confident about his ability to do that. And he's coming from the Sun Belt. So just like Elijah Mitchell came from the Sun Belt, Kamani Vidal, I want to go down and hit the G5 for that. So I certainly think that he should be respected in round 4, 5 of those rookie drafts. If I had to go further down the trough, because I like to, Michael Dr. Wiley of Mega Man fame.
I'm
Arizona.
so mad. There's no relation to Ohio State Michael Wiley, right?
No, I don't believe so.
But
I could be wrong.
He'd be a freaking day 2 pick if that was the case. But sorry, go on.
Bro, I know he probably would, right? Yeah, seriously. But, man, Wiley is a guy who I just loved in 2022. I just loved watching him for Arizona. I had him in a lot of places heading into the season. Unfortunately, he got banged up this season, was hurt almost the entire season, played through injury, but he couldn't perform like he did the year before. Yeah. And oh my God, did he perform in 2022? 46% breakaway rate, which is great. That went down to 20% last year, which is not nearly as good. But we're talking about elusiveness rating. Dude, he had a 204 elusiveness rating in 2022. That is breaking the scale, right? I mean, you're an ex-PFF employee. You know what that means.
Oh, my goodness.
That's astronomical, right? He had a 116 this year, which even injured is still well above the mean. But his ability to catch the ball, in my opinion, he's my second favorite pass catching back in the entire class behind Bucky Irving. Tyrone Tracy deserves to be in that class too. Tyrone Tracy is also another, like, you should probably be the third guy that I mentioned here in terms of his profile being able to translate and being like, oh my God, I can see this guy holding down a full-time job. But with Wiley's way down the board, though, like nobody's talking about him. So, out of respect to you, I got to do that.
Love the Kamani Vidal call. I mean, 5'7", 213. The dude ran a 4.46, and his 10-yard split was a 1.53. I mean, that's only 0.04 off what Xavier freaking Worthy was putting out there. So a lot of burst. Again, was at Troy, not the stiffest competition, but the guy also spent 4 years in college, but he's not even going to be 23 here until late August. So not, I feel like every running back I look at is going to be 24 before too long. We do have an extra year there. Love to call out on Michael Wiley. And yeah, Tyrone Tracy was one of the other running backs I wanted to bring up because, again, if we are trying to favor these pass catchers and explosive players, why wouldn't we look at a guy that spent, some of the early portions of his collegiate career as a wide receiver? So, Eric, I've had my heart broken seemingly year after year with the Antonio Gibson experience. He did have some good, we act like he never did anything. Like his rookie season was legit very productive. And okay, he flashed a little bit over the years. I'm not going to fall for it again. Maybe I will. Regardless, Tyrone Tracy, Eric, we got something here?
Dude, tell me he doesn't have that profile, right? He just screams Antonio Gibson to me. Everything about Tyrone Tracy. Former wide receiver, makes the transition over to Purdue when new head coach, new staff comes in. They're like, hey, how about instead of wide receiver, Tyrone, we give you a shot in the backfield? And my gosh, did that work out well? I mean, he got injured, obviously, but I had the pleasure of seeing him against Wisconsin early in the year in the in person in Lafayette. That being said, you don't need to go to Purdue to tailgate. All right. If you're planning on going to a college football game, go to Notre Dame. If you're in Indiana, just keep driving up the road to go to Notre Dame. You don't need a tailgate at Purdue. They're engineering students. They're not party students. So, but I saw him and just the versatility of everything he can do. He's 215 pounds. He's not small. So you don't look at him and say, oh, this guy has a scat back profile. He has more of like an A.J. Brown kind of, receiver profile of being like kind of a bully. Take a short pass, throw a stiff arm in somebody's face and get the yak. But then you throw him in the backfield, and my gosh, it just allows that kind of complete skill set and the rocked up frame to kind of play in a different way, And even though there's obviously Antonio Gibson as I would think it's kind of a negative comp at this point, that's still such an intriguing skill set that I think can work with the right player and in the right place. So he should be respected as well. Absolutely.
RAS score, raw athletic score, one of my favorite things to look at just as a general, kind of grouping together the size, speed, the jumping ability, and obviously, everything that goes with that. Out of the RB prospects, man, 9.78, 42nd out of 1,904 qualified running backs since 1987. So Will Shipley is really high on that. Not saying it's everything that needs to be here. But again, man, it's nice. I understand if it's not the most directly correlated thing, but do you want a really athletic, explosive running back or one that's not? Like, yeah, I'll take the more explosive dude 9 times out of 10. So, Eric, great stuff. I think the only big name running back we haven't overly gone over would actually just be Braylon Allen.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. Do you have any big thoughts here? I mean, talk about a freaking youngster out here and someone who, he has, already had quite a few carries. Really, getting a chance to lead that Wisconsin backfield from day one as like a 17-year-old freshman. I mean, it's crazy, what this guy was able to do. But thoughts on Braylon Allen, someone who I think has more, of a receiving profile than we might actually expect as a, workhorse out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, he actually caught passes this year for the first time. He didn't catch any leading up into the season. And, you talked about ADOT before with running backs, very, very savvy. Braylon Allen's ADOT minus 2.5 yards. Oof. So the stuff he's getting is just the release valve stuff. It's not anything that's being schemed. It's not like we were talking about Marshawn Lloyd, where there's it's being used in different ways, or even with Trey Benson, where if you watch Trey Benson catch the ball too, he had, and if you go to my Twitter, it was from like January. But I put a catch he had against Wake Forest that was absolutely one of the most ridiculous plays all season by any running back, where he caught a pass and went through 3 tackles to get a running back, to get a first down, and it was sheer force of will. But with Allen, you're not seeing him do those dynamic things. And I'm watching him in the hole. His feet are so interminably slow. Myself and your former PFF, colleague Sam Monson were at the combine talking about Braylon Allen, and he asked me about it. And I was just like, man, I can't do it. I can't get into Braylon Allen. And Sam, what he said was, he's like, yeah, I'm right there with you. I remember, he's like, I was watching him, and I had to check to see if I was playing the tape at a slower speed because I thought I was at 0.75 speed because that's how slow he was. And it just sort of perfectly encapsulated how I feel about watching the lumbering Braylon Allen. If you want the A.J. Dillon 2.0 experience for fantasy, then great. Go and take Braylon Allen. But if you want somebody who could actually have some upside, go with the guys that we're talking about here. I would way rather have Estime over Braylon Allen. But Estime's going, half a round after him? That's heresy, in my opinion.
I was trying to find a 40 anywhere for the guy because Dwayne.
You're not going to find him. You want to know why? Because he was lined at 4.4 flat. All right, on the combine markets, and I had him everywhere. I had him 15 times in Prize Picks parlays at 4.4 flat, and he didn't run because he was scared of giving me that money, Ian. Damn you, Braylon Allen. You're not going to find a 40 time on him. He wouldn't touch that track, which is, again, another reason why I take Estime, because I at least respect him for going out there and running it.
Yeah, and that's, All right, so Dwayne actually texted me, Braylon Allen's 40 at the Nike Spark Combine. Wait, he is still running, almost there, clocked it. That's literally what he wrote to me, which I freaking love it. But though, apparently 5.1 seconds, man, like that is miserable if true. I will say some of those Nike Spark times from like high school, like I think that's where Sam Howell's 5.140 comes from. Like I've seen some of those times that look a little bit wonky over the years. So, but yeah, this is another case where we probably don't need the 40 time, like Eric said, just put the game film on and you're going to see, sadly, what is the problem that my man's is not up.
Do you want to honestly take somebody that myself and the well-coiffed, the amazing hair of Dwayne McFarland both don't like? Hey, that's on you, guys.
Doesn't sound great. Eric, we had originally, we ended up talking running backs for almost a full hour. So I think we'll, leave this class here with that great stuff, my friend. But are there a couple guys? Because again, you're doing, C2S, which for those that don't know, Eric is literally carrying his teams from college into NFL. It is the most savage form of fantasy football out there. And what's your freaking league? 75 of you or something in one of these leagues?
We have a lot of people.
You and Thor.
We have a 50 teamer. Yeah, that's college fantasy only, not C2.
Okay,
that is a 50 team. Yeah, the college football championship. And you were in that league before. We'd love to get you in there again, my friend. But I know it's a task.
Such a grind. It's
a grind.
I want to, but you're going through the waivers. I guess this Hawaii receiver could give me something this week. It is so rough. But what are a couple names? You've already, slandered my guy, Quinshon Judkins, a little bit. That's okay, though. That's okay. It's your right. It's a free country. But what are a couple names that, people that maybe aren't so much in the weeds of college football, who could you see being, top 3, top 5, just overall kind of skill position prospects this time next year that we could be talking about?
Oh, yeah. Next year? Ooh, now we're getting into some fun. Now we're talking about my world. When it comes to next year, the wide receiver you're going to want to know about, and you probably have already heard about it to some extent, Tetaroa McMillan for Arizona. Okay, Tet. I like to, it's, hearkening back to the Vietnam War, the Tet offensive is what he is. Tet McMillan, he's 6'4", he's, 205, 210, or whatever have you, the prototype long, rangy, but fluid hips, wide receiver. Him and his high school teammate, Noah Fafita, the quarterback, both went from Servite High School in Anaheim to Arizona as a package deal, and they're staying there as a package deal. And he put up 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns last year, took over Jacob Cowling, who was the nominal number 1 the year before, and in his second season just took over and said, oh, this is mine. We are ready to take this into 2024 and rip the top off of the entire Big 12 now that Arizona's in there. Tyrone McMillan is a pleasure to watch. So smooth for a tall wideout. And we've had a hard time projecting tall wideouts over the past decade to the NFL. Oh man, I think he breaks the mold. I absolutely adore him. He's my wide receiver one. Also, you got to be mindful of Evan Stewart, who was on Texas A&M the past few years, just transferred to Oregon. He's going to take over that Troy Franklin role of that top field stretcher, and he's better than Troy Franklin. So he kind of got screwed last year at Texas A&M because their quarterback Connor Wegman got hurt, had to bring in Max Johnson, who couldn't throw outside the numbers, and really kind of neutered Stewart. He's going to be there this year. They're going to have Dylan Gabriel, who's going over from Oklahoma. He is going to eat major in that system. Yeah. And then Luther Burden, who everybody's been hearing about over there at Missouri since he came out. He was the number one wide receiver out of high school. Went over and really realized that promise, and all of his talent came to fruition last year. I like to see him catch a little more downfield passes. But in terms that intermediate, dangerous wide, Luther Burden will be a first rounder next year. That's happening. On the QB front, I am a Carson Beck guy.
Yeah.
Was Carson Beck through and through last season? I had him absolutely everywhere. I have him on all three of my C2C campus to Canton teams because I watched the spring game last year at Georgia and just said, oh my God, how has he not been playing over Stetson Bennett? How did he do it? Because Carson Beck is real. He's ready. It's a very unsettled 2025 QB class. If you target him in your W leagues, you will prosper. All about him. If we're looking 1 year down the line, it's Jackson Arnold. He is the Oklahoma QB, starting QB this year. He's taken over, and he's the reason why Dylan Gabriel transferred, because they said, look, Dylan, you had a great year last year, but the prodigal son has returned. It is Jackson Arnold's time. So those are the guys I kind of look at on that front. Running backs, our guy. I know you said Quinshon's your guy, but he was Ole Miss's guy last year. Yeah. Our guy, Trevion. I think Trevion would be the number one running back of this class. Went back because he's going to make more money at Ohio State than he would as a third round, second round running back. Yeah. He's like, I'm going to get $1 million. I'm going to grab the bag and live like a god in Columbus, just like Cardale Jones does.
Oh.
So, I think Trevion will be that RB1. He is that above Judkins from me, because of I attitude issues with Judkins, all those reports, and 4.4 yards per carry. What do you want? You can't be dropping. You can't have the 4.4 yards per carry, all right, at Ole Miss with driving the lane trains offense.
Oh yeah,
and expect me to give you RB1. I'm going Trevion.
Great stuff all around there. The Ted McMillan point, it's all making sense to me now, Eric, because you guys know how it goes. It's Saturday. Your early and your afternoon bets haven't gone quite the way you want, but we got that Pac-12 after dark, and I tend to just bet against programs that I don't really couldn't name a single player from, but I assumed Arizona sucked at football, and I kept freaking losing my bets. And now when I see Ted McMillan and his quarterback, making a bit more sense, Eric. So I'll make sure to shoot you a couple extra texts.
I'm heavily invested in Tyrone McMillan right here. Tyrone autograph, Bowman University. Boom. I've got the full color spectrum of Tyrone McMillan rookie cards. All the colors, all the autographs, fully leveraged. Cannot wait. I think he's the wide receiver one next year.
You are an absolute savage, Eric, and I mean that as respectfully and in the best way possible, my friend. So fantastic stuff. Everyone can follow you over on the old Twitter sphere at CF Froton. And you're just doing great work, man. NBC Sports, Rotoworld, holding it down for the college football fantasy faithful out there. And again, guess what, guys? I maintain if you just called fantasy points, impact points, or whatever, I think the quote unquote real football nerds would just, accept us all a bit more. So everything Eric's doing, again, translate both to college fantasy, NFL fantasy, and also just good old player evaluation. So appreciate you, Eric. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, I'll be writing my stuff for NBC Sports leading up to the NFL draft and thereafter. I'm still have my draft grades. I also have a whole full set of tiered rankings up there that you'll want to go and take a look at for your rookie drafts.
Eric, enjoy sunny San Diego, you lucky SOB. Yeah, we'll keep holding it down here in Ohio, but look forward to seeing you soon, my friends. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back more draft coverage. Actually, we'll be having some live streams next week, so make sure you guys check those out. But yeah, otherwise, have a great day. So for Eric, for producer James, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to Fantasy Life Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.